Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Spiritual Gap. Today you have Bryce and Steven, and it's currently 45 degrees in the garage where we're recording. If you look closely, you can actually see the steam rising from the cups.
You would have made a good radio jockey.
Oh, thanks, man.
There's still time, I think.
That's why I like podcasting, because it's kind of like radio jockeys in 2023.
True.
So, but I initially want to get your thoughts on this, Bryce.
Okay. I'm gonna open mine too, because I think, yeah.
What are your thoughts on Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's relationship? That's my that's what I want to know.
He's a football player, right?
He is a tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, 2-time Super Bowl champion.
Oh,
and Taylor
man.
Swift has now been seen at multiple of his games. They're an item. It's a national news headline. Every time I check the national news, it's like one of the top stories. This article says Travis Kelce wants all the boyfriends dressing up as him for Halloween. That's literally what the article says.
I'm curious what
To get his iconic mustache, right? That's what they
what does Travis Kelce's mustache look like?
Dude, it is like an Uncle Rico stash from Napoleon Dynamite. Anyways, the reason I want to talk about this...
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, it's quite the stash, bro.
Holy moly.
I have a theory on Taylor Swift's relationship with Travis Kelce.
This dude is
Yeah.
physically at least, he's something you should aspire to be.
Yeah, he's jacked, dude.
Dude.
He's a really good football player. There's no doubt about that. He's an incredible athlete. Anyway, so here's my theory on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
Okay.
Taylor Swift's biggest fan base, female,
Yeah.
probably early 20s
Yeah.
or mid 20s, 30s now, whatever. She has written, I don't know how many albums she's done, 5, 6, 7, something like that.
Yeah.
How many albums can you write about breakups with boyfriends before you become irrelevant? Because she's in her 30s now, I don't know if she can write another album that's just like about boyfriends and breakups, because she's done that so many times before. And so the natural progression for Taylor Swift's career...
She's got to get married?
She's got to get... Think about it, bro. So if she gets engaged, you got an engagement album. That's a solid hit. People are like, oh my gosh, have you heard Taylor Swift's engagement album? Then you got the marriage album. And like, oh, the love songs. Oh man, she's so happy.
Yeah.
And then you got the divorce album.
Oh, man.
I mean, we never want, if they do get married, we would never want to see Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift get divorced.
No.
But what I'm saying is, that's like decades worth of albums and music right there.
Yeah, so she's had...
That's all I'm saying.
She's had 10 original studio albums, 4 re-records, and 5 EPs.
Yeah, the re-records are like just re-recording her old albums.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know if those count. But what I'm saying is, she's in her 30s now. Like, she has to... The inspiration has to continue.
Yeah.
It's like the natural progression. Or else she can't just keep writing breakup albums until she's in her 70s. You know what I'm saying?
But maybe she's like, maybe she's gotten to the point where she's like, man, I want to settle down.
That's a possibility.
Because she's like, she's probably early 30s.
I can see her against my theory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would hate to say that Taylor Swift is doing this just for the potential content.
No, I'm not saying she's not in love with him. I'm just saying potentially, subconsciously, she's like,
she knows.
As you said, maybe it is just time to settle down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like musically wise, I mean, that's going to be some stellar albums right there.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. But I hope the intent is like, oh man, I want to find love.
Absolutely.
That would be my hope.
Yeah. Maybe once they get married. Can you imagine the news headlines if they do get married? It would be like every page of every national news. It'd be like the president getting married.
Yeah.
It's like America's couple.
I don't even think people would care about the president that much.
It's compared to Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, yeah.
Dude, I read that her tour, what's it called? Eras.
Yeah.
It produced more revenue than the GDP of like small countries.
Yeah, it's I think it's projected to be the first music tour to surpass $1 billion in revenue.
That's insane.
Yeah.
How much does that have to do with inflation, though? That's my question.
I have no idea. I know those tickets were just astronomically expensive.
Thousands of dollars, I think.
Yeah. It's wild.
For one.
Yeah, I don't know. That was a good one to start off with.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, my turn.
Okay.
We're going to go.
$1 billion, though.
$1 billion.
For Taylor Swift.
Okay, so the headline this morning. So for those of you who didn't pick up on it, we didn't intro this episode at all. So for those of you who didn't pick up on it, so we missed last week. So we recorded 7 episodes and then we took a break. That wasn't planned at all, but that's how it ended up being. We had Stephen was gone last week. I had a really busy week last week, and we had some scheduling conflicts with potential guests. So we didn't record one last week. And so this week, Stephen, I was out of town for the sermon, and Stephen...
We actually had Efren preach, who's an awesome guest preacher. Yeah.
I started listening to it. And I had started right as you had introduced him, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think you were walking off stage and Ephraim was, the comment he made was something like, I don't know how often Pastor Stephen takes a vacation, but I was just here.
Side note, I was not on vacation. I was working.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So right now we're just going through some news headlines and looking at... We're just going through some news headlines and looking at kind of commenting on them.
Reflecting on our thoughts.
Yeah. I mean... The thing that's all over the news right now is Israel Hamas.
I listened to a phenomenal podcast on that, by the way.
Oh, really? By who?
Preston Sprinkle.
Oh, that one.
Did you listen to it?
I'm about halfway through.
So Preston interviewed. So fascinating. So we've talked about this podcast before. It's called Theology in the Raw, and it's a guy named Preston Sprinkle who's a scholar, and he's from Boise, and he just interviews different people from different perspectives. And that's the reason I like him, is because oftentimes he interviews people who disagree with him, or just he allows all these perspectives to come out and hear him out. But this guy he interviewed is a Palestinian Christian. So he was actually born in Bethlehem, if I remember correctly.
He was born...
Or just right outside Bethlehem.
He wasn't born in Bethlehem, but he grew up in Bethlehem.
Oh, he grew up in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
But it was just so fascinating on the take, because, I mean, he wants peace, and I think everybody wants peace. But his perspective was, we need to look at the historical context as well. Like, obviously, what Hamas did was atrocious, horrific. But at the same time, there has been, from both sides, there's been negligence, I think. That's his point in the podcast. You got to listen to it. I'm not representing it well, but you can listen to it, Theology in the Raw. But it was just fascinating to hear someone who is from that area, who is a believer.
Yeah.
And his dad was a Baptist pastor.
Yeah.
In, I don't know where at. Do you remember?
I don't remember. But, I mean, I do remember him.
I think by Nazareth.
Yeah. It's so wild, I think, for those of us who read through Scripture, which in theory is all of us, I think.
Yeah.
And who are listening to this.
Everyone knows John 3:16.
Yeah. But just to know, just to hear somebody talking about, I grew up near Bethlehem, my dad was a pastor near Nazareth. You're just like, wait a minute. These cities are still there. And so when you think about, there's a lot of like, with any big event, there's like, surface level stuff that starts to boil to the top. And so everyone becomes like an armchair expert on Israel in 10 minutes. But I think, and a lot of people, I think the gentleman, I cannot remember his name. We'll link his podcast in the show notes. But he made a point of talking about it in the last episode. We linked the Israel Project with Francis Chan. And he made a point also of just making very clear, like, Israel has a very long history. And I think us as, if you're living in the West and you're American, America's got like a 250-year history.
Yeah.
We have been around for comparatively the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And so somewhere like Israel, that like this stuff dates back to like way deep Bible days.
Hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah. Like thousands of years of God's chosen people. And but with that, there's so many other civilizations that have also been around for thousands of years and have had thousands of years worth of conflict with Israel. And we just, as Americans, we just don't have any, we don't have any reference for that. Like the longest little tiff we've had is with England, because we,
little tiff.
Because we broke off from them. But like, think about being at war with two countries being at war for like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
You're just like, that's crazy. Just constantly like going back and forth. And then now that's that's coming to the modern age.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and we talked about this last time. Like Israel wasn't even considered a country until what do we say? The 40s? Was it 48? 46, something like
I
that.
want to say 46.
And so, as you said, like the armchair experts and all this stuff. But man, it's really difficult to navigate. But what I appreciate about that podcast is to give us a perspective. I think we should hear both sides, the perspectives. So, like, this guy's a Palestinian Christian. I think we should also hear from Jewish Christians and kind of see like what they believe the path forward is.
Yeah.
Is it a dual state type? Like I have no idea. I'm no expert by any means.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a really difficult conversation, and so
Yeah.
I appreciate hearing different perspectives than I think.
Yeah. Brooke and I were up at a film festival this weekend, and it was an absolutely wonderful film festival, and they host quite a few feature-length films. And the short film that we had in the festival was paired with this film called The Grab. And it was a
Feature film's like an hour and a half. Is it length?
It depends. It's typically over 45, but sometimes it's considered anything over 45. Sometimes it's considered anything over 60. So this
Okay.
one was like 2 hours. It's very long. Very good. It's a feature-length film called The Grab. I cannot pronounce the name of the guy who directed it, but she's directed quite a few things, and it follows a reporter with the or a journalist with the Center for Investigative Journalism.
Is it like a drama or is it a documentary?
It's a documentary. Okay. Yeah, it was all totally documentary film festival.
Yeah.
And so the premise of this documentary is looking at other countries going into other countries and buying up resources, but not like minerals and oil, but food and water.
Huh.
And so there's like the Saudis have bought like 15 square miles of land in Arizona.
What?
And are farming
That is fascinating.
And are farming in Arizona because in La Paz County, there's no restrictions on groundwater rights. So the Saudis are coming in and building these massive wells that are pumping 3,500 gallons a minute to basically creating an oasis in the middle of the desert, and it's drying up the water for residents.
Fascinating.
But then it just goes around and looks at like how countries are doing stuff like this, so they talk about the Arab Spring back in Arab Spring 2014, and just food shortages and these crises and all this stuff. You're just like, wow, there's so much happening on the world stage that is very much behind the scenes that we don't get to see.
Crazy.
You know?
I've heard that same thing with China going into places in Africa.
Yeah.
Because Africa is a very, there's certain aspects that are impoverished.
Very mineral poor, but or resource rich, but
but
infrastructure poor.
Infrastructure. Yeah, correct. And so like I've heard that China makes they make the roads for certain countries, like in Kenya and stuff like that. They'll bring in infrastructure in exchange for being able to mine minerals, stuff like that. But it's fascinating. I'm curious on your thoughts. The Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Do you think the internet is basically reversing the Tower of Babel?
We're digging a grave.
Yeah.
Very deep grave.
So Tower of Babel, right? Everyone speaks one language. And it's kind of a challenging passage to wrestle with because it's like they can do whatever their hearts desire. I mean, I don't have the Bible in front of me.
Okay, we'll have the internet.
You can look up that verse, but it's like they could do, I don't know. You have to look it up. But then God causes them to, everyone has a different language then, and they kind of scatter. Mm-hmm. But now what the internet has done, and I mean, we're in 2023, I bet in 10 to 20 years, you'll be able to have a device that you can, it happens today. You can do it today. It's just expensive.
Yeah.
But you can go to a country, put in earbuds, and it translates it for
Everything.
you.
Yeah.
And so like they speak to you, and then it says in English for those who speak English. And then if you respond to them, then it like a speaker plays.
Yeah.
They're like whatever, French or whatever.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Yeah.
So it makes the world so much smaller where now you can basically go anywhere and talk to anyone. I mean, not yet. Yeah. But I think as the technology furthers.
It's getting there.
Yeah. You could just put an earbud in and you could talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. Which is crazy. Yeah. So then it's like, what is that going to do? It really is. I mean, you're like, here we go. It really does lead to the whole idea of like the one world economy type deal.
Yeah.
Where I think the internet is shrinking us to as a world, as a people group, as like a whole, where borders mean less because you can communicate to anyone at any time, almost any language. And so it's like culture is slowly morphing to be one culture instead of a multitude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, not 100%, but it kind of seems like as time goes on, it's definitely more so now than it was 50 years ago. And so you think about another advancement of 50 years. What's that going to do to culture? It's just fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
To kind of see like this cultural revolution, worldwide revolution kind of take place in real time. It's bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, I guess two things. I'm excited. I can't remember what the stat was, but I think it was something like by 2050, we should have a Bible in everyone's language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think I've heard Rick Warren talk about that. I think the gospel has been proclaimed to every country, at least.
Yeah.
Because I think
country,
Saddleback sent, which is Rick Warren's church, sent someone to every country in the world.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So wild. Yeah, but still not everyone is heard. I remember we had some friends that lived here and they recently moved to Idaho. And the husband was originally from Alaska. And he was telling us about there are unreached tribes in Alaska.
Yeah, like way up there north.
And you're just like, wait a minute. This is like America. And there's unreached. And I know, I don't think the Navajo are considered unreached. But there's a lot of people that do. Like international missions to the Navajo.
Yeah.
Because there's people within our own borders that are still unreached people.
Oh yeah, dude.
Just so wild.
I mean, it's pretty fascinating in a place like the United States, which is so huge. And I think it's so diverse in its geography, where you have a place that's South Florida that's like 80 degrees every day.
Yeah.
And then you have a place like Northern Alaska, which it's like there's no... like a plane once a month.
It's dark until May.
It's dark till May. Like, because I remember I was kind of shocked last year. I came across an article that a village in Alaska, someone got mauled by a polar bear. Like, it's not a joke. And it's like a real story. And I was like, oh my gosh.
That happens.
Yeah,
so
today.
wild.
That was like 2022.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it's just crazy to see that still the differences. And there's actually a YouTube guy. Do you ever watch? His name is Peter Santinello. Do you watch his stuff?
I don't watch his
He's a YouTuber. You would like his stuff. It's kind of like a live documentary where he goes to different places in the country and he just films his experience.
Oh, wow.
So he's gone to like his most popular series lately was Appalachia, and he went to like the.
I think I've seen this one.
Yeah, that was the most famous. But he goes to like the Bronx. He goes to like the quote gang areas in LA. And stuff. It's just fascinating. And he hangs with the Amish people, and he just goes and films his experience with them.
Crazy.
But what do you think on the aspect of the world shrinking with like a reverse of the Tower of Babel? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting. I think the world in some ways is shrinking, but I think the world has more contrast. You know, like, because I feel like certain people are getting farther, because in some ways we're getting farther away. You know, like we're able to contact anyone. Like when we were in Africa with Derek, like I could pick up WhatsApp right now.
Yeah.
Right now it's 9:15 a.m. here, so it's 7:15 p.m. there.
Yeah.
I could pick up my phone and FaceTime with the whole orphanage.
That's so crazy. Or you could send a text message and it's like boom.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
That's so like we don't like that's revolutionary.
Yeah.
That you can communicate in real time today with someone on the other side of the planet.
See, but I think
almost anywhere with satellite stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
It's getting closer.
I think we're able to contact more people than we ever have.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to continue to get better with things like Starlink and other resources. But I don't think it's necessarily helping us connect better.
Yeah.
You know, like if you had a device that you wore that translated all of the gibberish into whatever language it is, and then you go speak back to that person, that's helping you contact that person and have a conversation with them and ask them, like, you know, where do I go get a croissant? but it's not helping you connect to that person. Like at face value, like that's up to us as people to use these tools to connect with people. And I don't think we always necessarily use them as tools for connection.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're saying, though it's easier to connect with people, at the same time, I think we've kind of reflected on this, has driven us apart.
In some ways.
So check this out. You guys won't be able to see because you might be listening, but I'll show Bryce this. I was at a coffee shop yesterday.
I got this new tool, by the way, for this podcast that would allow me to like instantly share stuff, which would be super great.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
I'm going to start.
So I was at a coffee shop in it was actually in Monmouth, which is like a small, like 10,000 people or something like that. 15,000 Monmouth Independence connected. I was at a coffee shop and I was just sitting at a table. I was about to have a meeting with the church guy. And I just looked up and there's a line of 4 people. Look at that.
I'm going to share that. Wow, that's a cute coffee shop.
Oh, it's super cool. Yeah.
A lot of
I hang out
eyeballs.
there all the time. But in
Everyone's
this picture,
on their phones.
It's not even that they're on their phones. It's like they are.
And they're 6 feet apart.
It's just like ingrained into them from 2020. But I'm like, gosh, I don't want to be legalistic where it's like, oh, they're on their phones. Like, if they weren't on their phones, would they just be talking to each other and making friends?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like we're in a different world. It's kind of like Ready Player One. It's like getting there. Like that's when Apple released their new. Well, it hasn't come out yet, but they came out with a new product called the Vision Pro. It says Apple, and they call everything Pro.
I have some thoughts on the Vision Pro.
Oh, you do?
Keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I'm like, man, I do think the next progression for technology or what's going to happen, whether we like it or not, is that type of deal, the Vision Pro. So it's basically a headset. A headset makes me sound like an old person. It's like I don't know, what would you call it? Virtual reality goggles?
It's a virtual reality system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, man, I think it's going to make us even further apart. Like we're going to be isolated. We again, there could be some benefits that come out of it. Like I did a counseling intensive last week and it was all via Zoom and I had a great time. It was fantastic. So there could potentially be benefits, but at the same time, I think we have to look at the shadow side of things of what is it going to do to us as a civilization when everything is through technology and you don't have the physical contact of a person. Because even like when I was meeting with my therapist, he was like, man, at the end, he's like, I wish I could hug you and say, proud of you, something like that. So although Zoom is a phenomenal tool that you don't have to like fly across the country, it's not the same.
And I think Mark Zuckerberg's perspective on that is like, well, we're going to get to the point where you could like, you have an avatar and you guys could hug. And it's just like,
that's so
Mark,
weird.
It's not the same thing.
That's so weird.
It's
it's like the haptic feedback where if like I went like that, like you would feel it.
Yeah.
Wherever you're at, because you like wear special gloves or something.
Yeah. And I don't think people understand, like, there is no substitute for human contact.
Yeah, there's zero substitute. So it's interesting. So I was doing therapy last week, so I'm thinking about this stuff. And there's an experiment called the Harlo monkey experiment from the 50s or 60s. You can look it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so it's all about he does an experiment on baby monkeys, and he's basically proving that a baby needs the care of a mother or of a parental figure, father, mother. And the experiment is he has a wire mother that's not very like cozy and comfy that feeds the baby, so it has like its nutrition. And then you have like a cloth monkey or like a cloth parent figure that's like soft and easy to cuddle with type of a deal.
Yeah.
And he takes it through a range of experiments, basically trying to prove which one the baby monkey would define as its mother. And we would think like, oh, of course, it's the mom that feeds him nutrition, but it's actually the other one.
The comfy one?
The one where he receives comfort.
Yeah.
And it's like, you think about it, it's like that as a society, like it goes all the way back to our kind of first impressions of planet Earth. Like when we come into this world as babies, what do you need is the comfort and love of a parent.
Yeah.
Which is why you guys do foster and you guys do phenomenal work. Like I know Brooke's walking around with Lincoln right now as it came in.
Yeah, just whoosh,
because
on the
that's
ramp. Yeah.
the kids need that security and the stableness. Because if they don't, that's what I was talking to my therapist. If you don't get that, then there's two things your brain could do. you either distance from people, and so you are not enable, but it's more challenging for you to build relationships with people.
Totally.
Because you're just like, get away from me. I don't know what this feels like.
Because you expect that someone's going to leave.
Yeah.
And so you just keep everyone at arm's length.
Exactly. So then you never have to get hurt.
Exactly.
Kind of
Yeah.
Or the other thing that can happen is that you call it like a fluttering in your mind, where you're not getting what you need, and so your mind kind of just keeps shooting off like what I'm looking for something.
Yeah.
And so it can almost propel like, it's like your mind can't settle down. It's just like choo 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 choo. You referred to like butterflies.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, as humans, we need that contact.
Yeah.
We need human contact. And I don't think even if you have taptic feedback and gloves, it represents the same.
Because
carrot. Yeah.
Because I think feeling is one thing, but like knowing is another thing.
Absolutely.
So if you're just like, oh yeah, this is this person is touching me. We know that person's not touching you. That person's wearing a glove, and then it's some silicone thing that's touching you.
It's weird.
And I'm not saying that there aren't circumstances where like, that's a good thing, a loved one on the other side of the earth, and you feel something or whatever. But I think so. There's this study. It's called ACEs. I believe it was done by Kaiser Permanente.
Yes.
It's adverse childhood experiences, and so it basically. A lot of you, if you have young kids and you've taken them to the doctor, they generally will have you do an ACEs survey. And it's like, have your kids been exposed to substance use, or has anyone in your household unit been affected by homelessness in the last 6 months or year or whatever? And so it was a rather extensive study, and it basically showed that youth that have interacted with these certain target groups, like, homelessness or substance use or parents with mental illness or anything like that, they're at a much higher likelihood for also having issues of homelessness and other stuff.
Absolutely.
But one of the really fascinating things, it's if you read the study, it's pretty dark to show what the effects of these things have on youth and adolescents in developmental stages. You read this and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is wild. But then there's some glimmers of hope. Like the study shows that it's like youth with at least one loving parental figure, the likelihood of having adverse childhood experiences decreases by like 90%. Just one loving parental figure. It's not even a mom or a dad or whatever. It's one loving parental figure, period.
Yeah.
And you're just like, and that's someone who's, in the home, and, you have an emotional bond to and a physical bond to, and they're meeting your basic needs and, creating this hedge of protection. So it's really interesting what relationship can do, and in connection can do. And I think going back to the stuff, like the Vision Pro, I think the Vision Pro from Apple is fantastic. My gripe with the Vision Pro was it came out while I was in Uganda. Oh. So we're in the middle of the bush.
And you're like, what is this?
At this orphanage, and Apple launches the Vision Pro. And I'm like, I don't like to use like definitive statements like the Apple Vision Pro will never help anyone in Africa, because you just can't use definitive statements like that. But it's like, what is the Apple Vision Pro going to do for this orphanage?
It's for rich people.
Yeah, I'm like,
I think it's $1,000. No, I think it's $2,000.
I think I might even be more than that.
I think it's $2,000. Yeah.
Let's see.
And kind of going back to what you were saying before, about the one loving. Well, how much is it?
$3,499.
No, it's not.
So it's $3,500 for the Apple Vision Pro.
It's $3,500.
And get this. So the orphanage that we work with, they need about $1,200 a month.
$1,200 a month.
Yep. To do school fees
for how many children?
$1,200 US for about 60 kids. School fees, food, rent, all that stuff. It's about $1,200 bucks a month.
Yeah.
And you're like, So $3,500. One Apple Vision Pro is, like basically 3 months.
That's
of
crazy.
Supporting an entire orphanage.
Wow.
And I think we've gotten to the point where, and I say this as someone like my job is to create things. I have technology all over the place. We've got cameras and a recorder that's running into a switcher, and we've got audio recorder, and there's a monitor here. I'm surrounded by technology day after day after day. But I think we've really gotten to the point where there's a lot of technology that's just created for the sake of creating technology. And I think a lot of these tools allow for great collaboration, but I think there's this sense of like, well, what are we creating for? Why, like, are we making things to make things, or are we making things for the greater good of humanity? Because I think there's, we were at this festival, and honestly, there's a lot of really sad films. There was, The Grab, which is a film about, countries going in, buying or stealing or, kicking people off their land to have,
Wow.
to farm and have water rights to places. There was another film about how, wild Mustangs are being killed. There's another film about, called The Patrol, that was about, Westerners basically illegally burning rainforest in Nicaragua to make space for ranches to sell meat to America.
Yeah.
And you're just like, there's so much. And this is why I love documentary film, because you get to bring these stories to life. But there's just so much like pain. And like, I think art is beautiful, and technology is wonderful, and has just done so many amazing things for humans. But are we getting to the point where we're just creating technology to just create technology?
Well, it's interesting because I think with the iPhone revolution, so Steve Jobs created the first iPhone. Well, Apple did under Steve Jobs' leadership. So I remember the opening kind of keynote was like, internet,
Side note,
phone, iPod, all together.
one of the guys at the festival who lives on San Juan Island is the guy who shot the commercial for the first iPhone.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
The one with like the cool, like the colorful one with like the headphone.
I don't remember which one it was.
Do you remember when Apple's advertising was the white headphones with the like if you didn't have
color.
white headphones, you were not a living person.
No. And then they did the like Mac vs. PC stuff.
Oh,
really funny.
so funny. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry.
So technology shifted so much in such a small amount of time. Like you see, I think I saw a picture on the internet. It was a terabyte of storage in 1980 versus today.
It was like a warehouse.
It was a warehouse, and now it's like a micro SD card.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my heavens.
Yeah.
That is insanity. And so that's kind of like the natural progression of these companies, even Microsoft, but mostly Apple took advantage of it. It's like they changed with technology. They innovated as technology innovated. But now, like an iPhone has looked the same for a decade.
Yeah.
About. I mean, it's grown, but mostly it's a rectangle.
It's a rectangle with a screen.
With a screen.
3 buttons.
And so now they're trying to the most recent update was like, hey, now it's titanium. And
USB-C, baby, let's go.
Oh, that's cool. But
that's not an update. That's something you should have done 10 years ago.
Exactly. And so it's like I think they don't know what to do. And again, as we've talked about before, in the United States, everything has to be up and to the right or else you're a massive failure.
Yeah.
And so for Apple as a company, they're like, what are we going to do? Well, granted, Tim Cook's done a phenomenal job. They were really building out their iCloud business and streaming and all this stuff to get some other revenue sources besides iPhone and stuff. But it's like technology, I think, is getting to a point where it has already, like we can't go much further. Like a terabyte is now the size of my thumbnail. In another couple of decades, is it going to be smaller? I don't think it's possible. I mean, maybe it is.
Yeah.
I think like I saw some articles like we're starting to talk about like nanotechnology or almost like organic technology where
solid state batteries.
And stuff like I have no idea. I'm no expert by any means, but now they're like they didn't know what to do. So it's like, well, the Vision Pro, okay, headset. Facebook's done it. Meta, I guess Meta has done it. You can play games on it, but is it that useful yet? No. But when Apple comes out with it, like people will follow because it's Apple.
Yeah, I think one of my, like in my experience with, so I mean for a lot of what I do, like producing videos and content for people, there's always this pre-stage of like, hey, we're gonna get together and we're gonna talk about what we're gonna make. Either the video or the photo shoot, and we're gonna have a conversation about what are your needs, and how can I help you, satisfy those needs essentially, and create something for you that's going to do X, Y, and Z for your business or your nonprofit or whatever. And every single time I get the chance to meet with someone in person, meet with the client in person, goes so much better than Zoom or email or whatever. There will not be anything that can replace sitting across the table from someone and having a conversation.
100%.
And I don't know that that's what they're trying to do, but I think they're trying to get close.
That's Mark Zuckerberg's like whole pitch.
Yeah.
It's like our mission as a company is to bring humankind closer together.
But I don't think you are.
Yeah.
I don't think because because the problem is it's like a hammer. I feel like maybe this is a dumb illustration, but it's...
We'll find out. Go.
I think every tool has the capacity to do its job and do something important. Like a hammer, you can build a mansion with a hammer.
Yeah.
You can destroy a mansion with a hammer. And I think that's what you're finding out with tools is that with any tool, like a vacuum cleaner, like you can use it to clean your house, or you can ruin a carpet with it if you use it wrong.
Yeah.
One of the lights died. That's sad. All right, one's still going.
We'll see how one blue lightsaber.
Yeah, you can ruin an entire. You can ruin an entire carpet with a vacuum cleaner if you use it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's something like with Facebook. Like, yeah, how many people have I connected with on Facebook that has led to, deeper relationships, or friends that have moved away and we've been able to stay in contact through Messenger, or, people who moved overseas or whatever. Like, that's a beautiful tool, but you look at just watch The Social Dilemma and see how, what Facebook's role in, displacing hundreds of thousands of Muslims in Myanmar.
Wow.
It's like,
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, they basically had one moderator in charge of the entire country.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it was a horrendous event, and people died, and there's still people that are displaced from Myanmar.
Wow.
And so it's like, yeah, this is a tool that can be used for great things, to connect people and to bring people closer together. However, it's also a tool that, when used improperly, does really terrible things.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's how Facebook started. Because I don't know if you remember back when Facebook was like in the late 2008, 2009, all you saw was posts from your community, your friends. And now you see sponsored posts, you see shared articles. I mean, it's just like, it's everything. And typically with the algorithm, as we've talked about, the algorithm wants you to stay on the website as long as possible.
Stay on the platform.
And so they will show you, horrific things sometimes. Or not, it's just like whatever gets you to click. Yeah. And so usually, it's kind of like that news thing they used to say, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
And so now you're just seeing that your entire timeline, and instead of seeing the community. And I'm not saying we should be ostriches putting our heads in the sand, but it's interesting because I think that's how it started, where now it's morphing. And again, I think it comes back to everything in our country has to be up and to the right all the time. Because like Apple, Meta, these guys, they're speaking to their investors. And so they're investing into them as a company, hoping that the company is going to grow. And so if you're not going to grow, it's like, well, then why are we investing into you?
Yeah. So
it's just fascinating on a cultural level.
So here's a fun study I can't figure out who did this study really fast, but
Before you go into that, I just want to say, if you're watching on YouTube and not just listening, I can see my breath right now.
It's cold out here. We don't have a heater in the studio. I need to go get one. If anyone has a heater, they're not using one. Bless us with it. That'd be awesome. So there's a study. This is on the BBC. BBC's not the ones who did the study, to my understanding. A team of 6 independent fact-checking sources, including Snoops and Urbangled, to identify whether stories were genuine. Their findings published in the Journal of Science included that false news stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories.
What?
70%.
70% more likely.
It took true stories around 6 times longer to reach 1,500 people, and true stories were rarely shared beyond 1,000 people, but the most popular false news could be up to 100,000 times.
That's crazy.
And it's the, yeah, so I think...
I mean, it's the whole dilemma right now. Like, that's why Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the whole idea of free speech. And it's kind of like, it's like the Wild West we're in right now. Because it used to be, you get your newspaper and no one would ever not trust the newspaper.
Yeah.
In my growing up years, anytime before 2008, probably 2005. Yeah. It's like it's the news. But now, basically, anybody can be a journalist. You don't have to go to school to be a journalist. If you just have a successful website, you're a journalist. And so, basically, everyone could be a journalist. And so, there's so much information that in the last 2 decades, now we are responsible for, ciphering through all of the information. And kind of filtering it, and now we have to judge for ourselves what's true and what's not, which is really challenging to do because then you have like a distrust for everybody, and you're like, I don't know if I can trust this or not because there's so much false news out there.
Yeah,
and because all people want to do is you get clicks because in this day and age you get clicks, you get marketing, and the internet is run on ads. There's no doubt that the internet is run on ads. Google is an advertisement company. They're run on ads. YouTube, which is owned by Google, is an ad-based company. Facebook is an ad-based company.
Everything is an ad-based company. I mean, even if you...
Apple's really the only one that's not yet.
Because they have so much money.
I mean, Apple. I think their whole deal is the App Store. They have the most popular smartphone. And so anybody who has any platform on the iPhone has to go through the App Store. And anytime any revenue goes through any of the apps used in the App Store, I think it's like 30% goes to Apple.
Wow. Yeah, there's that big... Does it like keep flickering? Yeah, it's so wild. I'm trying to find a stat. Dang it. But it was a stat about how many recant statements the New York Times had printed.
Oh, did you see the one they recently did?
No.
I don't want to.
I know they did one about the Israel-Hamas hospital attack.
Because they said that the attack on the hospital was Israel. And it was headline news.
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, just kidding, it wasn't. And it's like, you can't make a mistake like that.
And it was in state. Well, okay, so here's 2 problems before I get to this. One, Twitter is the best news source. Everything is so much faster, so much more accurate. You're getting stuff from people that are on the ground. And so the truth about what happened with that hospital attack was like almost instantaneous on Twitter. Whereas like New York Times and I don't know if AP reported it or not, but I knew New York Times is the big one. Maybe Washington Post, I think, was the other one. But it just takes them so long to get information compared to something like Twitter that they wanted to break the story, so they broke it. It was wrong. And then it took them, it was like over 36 hours to get it
3
right.
3 days, yeah.
And you're just like, what? Because it was like for those of you who don't know the instance, they basically reported like Israel blew up a hospital. And it was like, and then they were showing, the picture that they showed in the article was a hospital that had been blown up somewhere completely different. Wasn't even the hospital they were talking about.
It's so messed up.
And it was like, what it ended up being was a rocket that was launched not by Israel, but by another terrorist organization that didn't even hit a hospital, but hit a parking lot next to a hospital.
Wow.
It was just this whole there is a big difference between terrorist organization strikes parking lot next to hospital and Israel blows up hospital.
Yeah.
But we Brooke and I were talking about this after the film festival because, there was, goodness, I can't remember exactly how many films there were, but so many of them were just so sad. And we are overloaded with information these days, and not good information. We were just talking about of fake news traveling faster than good news. So we're just overloaded with information that's not good for us, that's not beneficial, it's not positive, it doesn't bring joy, it's not life-giving information, and we're just inundated with this, And so it's just so sad.
I think it's fascinating on talking about the New York Times, right? I kind of think the reason they did that, this is just my personal opinion, don't quote me on this. I kind of view it back on a systemic level as well as anxiety. The New York Times, for the last probably 2 centuries, has been the #1 news publication for our country. And so now we're at the day and age, as I said before, everyone can be a journalist now. And so, as you said, like with Twitter, someone can be on the ground in Israel and report something that's happening live, that they are experiencing firsthand. Now, traditionally, you would have to, like let's say a reporter's job would be to find that person, interview that person, and then write an article.
Yeah.
But now, because of technology, they can do it immediately. So you still have to like filter through and like, is this true or not? But I think like the New York Times sees the writing on the wall, and all these other news publications that they're losing their territory. Like they're not going to survive. And so then you're talking about people's jobs. And so I think in this case, they're like, well, I guess we got to guess, which is, I would still say is a mistake. That is wrong.
Yeah.
Because if they're first, that means still they are needed.
Yeah.
But if they're not first, it's like who wants
You're
to read
not
an
first, you're
article?
last.
Yeah, who wants to read an article about New York Times about something that happened 3 days ago that everyone's already seen a bunch of posts and articles written about?
Well, and
It's just fascinating to think about.
how many of us read the article?
Yeah, it's like the headline in like 2
You know,
lines.
you're just like, oh my goodness, Israel blew up a hospital? That's crazy. Next sad thing.
It's so crazy.
Joe Biden says this thing. You're like, oh my gosh. And you're like, next sad thing, like
Yeah.
home invasion in South Salem. You're just like,
I was
yeah.
listening to another podcast, a comedian guy. His name is Dustin Nickerson. He's a really funny dude. He's got a funny Instagram and stuff, but he's stand-up comedic, but comedy dude. He was saying how TikTok/Instagram Reels and how it's such a crazy world that you scroll through and it's short form content. And so I think the longest TikTok is like 60 seconds now. Maybe it's up to 90 seconds.
Wow.
I'm
No,
not
I
sure.
think you can do up to 10 minutes on TikTok now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so but
Not that
you're
anyone's doing
flipping
that.
through with your finger and you're just like next, and you could see like somebody dying from cancer and like praying over, like a heart wrenching post, and the next one's like a funny cat video.
Yep.
And it's like, what does that do to your brain? That's crazy.
Well,
It's
and
like it's just like the emotional roller coaster of you're weeping because somebody's dying, and then the next one you're like laughing because it's never happened in human history before.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy to navigate that.
Well, and I think and AJ Swoboda, I think we've already talked about this, but AJ Swoboda opened up a sermon that he gave at Bridgetown Church with this, of talking about, there was a study that looked at the difference between soldiers and at the end of World War II and at the end of Vietnam,
Yep.
and how in Vietnam you got on a plane and you were back in your home within 2 days, whereas
I think even less than that.
yeah, there was like World War II, you sat on a boat and you had to sail across. You just sat on a boat with all your buddies,
Yeah.
and sailed across the Atlantic for 2 weeks before you even got back to the mainland.
Yeah.
And then you had to get a train or a bus or whatever to get back home. It's just, we don't have time to process anything these days. Talking about, going to therapy, you going to therapy last week. I spent like a year and a half in therapy. We just, as people, don't, the pace, go back to slowing down. The pace.
I was going to say that, dude.
The pace at which we live, and I feel super blessed that I can go to therapy and that I have access to that.
Yeah.
And the pace at which we live just does not allow us to slow down and ask our, Brooke and I taking kids out of the foster system and doing foster care, like it's very intentional in the sense that it's like, like these kids are going to have attachment issues. They've been removed from their families, and there's a lot going on. And so there's a lot of intentionality around, getting them into counseling and care and recognizing that there's, trauma-informed care and all this stuff. But we don't realize how much, and I want to use like trauma very gently, because there's like the kiddos that we've had in our care have been through like immense trauma, and then Rest and Sprinkle had another podcast where he was talking about one of his guests was someone who had escaped occupation in wasn't Algeria, I don't think.
I don't know.
I can't remember.
We're talking
what
about the
country it was.
podcast a lot, though. You gotta listen to Theology in the Raw. It's a solid listen.
It's one of definitely my weekly listens. But talking with this guy who had escaped basically genocide, and he was like, and who had like watched his friends been murdered, and you're like, well, this is trauma. This isn't like, I'm gonna get our podcast canceled, but like this isn't like, oh, someone didn't let your emotional support hedgehog into the classroom. Like,
dude, the people with the emotional support hedgehogs are going to cancel you.
Yeah. I mean, in like truly like people that have like emotional support animals and stuff, like I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between we knew someone with an emotional support hedgehog. I also knew someone with emotional support.
Actually did know someone with emotional support hedgehog.
And someone with an emotional support duck.
You never know, I guess.
You never know. And those things are beautiful tools for people who need them. Mm-hmm. But I think it's okay to recognize that there is a difference between someone who has escaped genocide and has been a refugee and has like, that is trauma. Like that is like, that there's some serious stuff there, as opposed to like, I need an emotional support hedgehog to get through my math class.
I also think, I could be wrong in this as well. This is just us processing our thoughts. I think there's a difference between abuse and trauma. So actually, in my understanding,
and violence too, where people would say like, you don't let me bring my hedgehog in class, like you're committing violence against me. Like, no.
Yeah, that seems kind of odd. No. I'm not sure on that one, but like trauma is not what we go through. It is our body's response to it. So like what we go through is abuse. So in my view, so like the foster kids that you bring to your home, or like that guy, that is violence and abuse that he went through.
Yeah.
And then his body's response to it is
trauma.
Yeah. So when we talk about speaking through like a traumatic event, it's our body's response to it. And the crazy thing is oftentimes trauma is you have a chemical reaction. And I think that's part of the hard thing. It's not just a change the way you think, it's like a thought process.
Yeah.
Our thoughts sometimes are tied in with our body. And in fact, our brain is, this is just like free therapy because this is my therapist tells me, right? So, but our brain is connected to all the different aspects of our body. It's not just in our head.
Yeah.
And actually, your brain is wired to our chest. So like when you have like a gut feeling, like that's like a biological response sometimes.
Yeah. It's like that
or
huge
like
nerve, like the vagus nerve that goes into your
I don't know the proper
gut.
scientific definitions, but like I think when scripture talks about the heart, like it's like right there, it's in your chest. But so I think that's like the definition of, well, not definition. I'm not a clinical dude at all, but I think there is a difference between abuse and then trauma.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to deal with that trauma, as you said, and like going back to the World War II thing, is we have to have a safe space to decompress and talk about it. So in Vietnam, the crazy thing is they're on the battlefield, and then I think they're home within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Because they just hop on a plane, and then it's like, you're in America, boom, home.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Versus, as you said, World War II, you'd get on a boat, and then you have all your other buddies who went through this abuse/violence with you. And so you can process through that trauma together.
Yeah.
And so then when you get back, it's like, okay, it's the slowing down concept that we're talking about, because it's, if you just ignore it, if you just try to power through it, you have to have a safe space to be able to process through. So like World War II, again, it's a safe space to process through because everybody went through the same thing.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, dude, I saw a buddy die. You're like, dude, I'm so sorry. That's awful.
Yeah.
I was there too. I saw a buddy die too. And so it's like, it's a safe space versus you come home from Vietnam, you can't talk with your kids and your wife, be like, I saw 2 dudes die yesterday and now I'm home.
You're like, what?
They're like,
Yeah.
And
there's such a stigma with therapy.
We're big proponents of therapy here.
We are.
I am.
Man. Lord knows I need it. I think too, Yeah, I won't go into that. I think therapy is so important. And I think going back to the pastors conference, no, dang
A
it.
couple weeks ago, AJ Swoboda,
Not AJ.
Nijay Gupta,
Not Nijay.
Daniel Malaputi.
Yeah, Daniel Malaputi. His whole thing was, kind of the question that all the speakers got asked was, hey, what's one thing you wish you would have known earlier in life? I think, right? That was the premise.
Question. Yeah.
And Daniel's was the importance of good friends. And my big takeaway from him was like, you are never going to know when you need a good friend. And I think there's that joke. I think we brought it up before on this of, the main miracle of Jesus is the fact that he was, a man in his early 30s with 12 close friends, Yeah, just a really good joke. But it's so true that we just don't have close friends, and it's hard to keep close friends. And it's not about and again, we have all the tools for connection, I have friends that live in the city that I could just go drive right now and see, I know where they work. I know where they live. I have their phone numbers, and we follow each other on Instagram, and we're Facebook friends and all this other stuff. It's not a matter of connection. It's not a matter of access to them and their ear. It's a matter of I've got to let this person in.
Yeah.
And I've got to, when this person's trying to, come into my life and open up, I've got to be available. It's that Facebook doesn't solve that problem.
Yeah.
So
are you ready for this?
No.
This isn't controversial. This is just my passion. I think this is what
I'm going to start saying that to people.
I think this is what the church can offer the community.
Yeah.
Because in today's day and age, people are striving or they are in a desperate need for relationships.
Yeah.
And so the church can produce those. You think about what, we're a small church, at least small church. You look across there's different crazy technologies and, larger churches, larger programs, stuff some of that stuff is excellent. I'm for that stuff.
Yeah.
But at the core, what can the church offer that's different than what culture can?
Yeah.
And in my mind, outside of the gospel, which is the redemption love of Jesus, it's a safe community where you can establish relationships with people.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You said Jesus had 12 close friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about living through life together, but not superficially, hand in hand and marching forward into the abyss of the unknown.
Yeah.
But as a community of followers of Jesus. So I think that's one of the gifts the church can give. My other passion, as we're talking about slowing down, I think the other gift that church communities can give to their community is a pace of the slowing down and a less reactive space.
Yeah.
Because we talk about slowing down a lot, and I honestly think it's the biggest challenge. And what's funny is, I did a week of intensive therapy. At the end of the day, honestly, it was Steven, you need to learn how to slow down.
Wow.
And it wasn't it wasn't, there's a lot of different other aspects of it, but it's more of Steven, the things that you experienced in life, you need to, I think, moving forward, to be able to be more present with people. So instead of meeting with someone and you're, on your phone and thinking about 10 other things, no, you're with that person and you're listening to that person. You're present with them. Your mind's not elsewhere. And so doing that in your relationships with your friends, your family, your kids, your community, I think that's a gift that we can give, where we're present with people instead of. But the only way to do that is to slow down, because our minds are just choo choo. At least mine is choo 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 choo. And it shoots off a mile a minute, where my mind's 10 other places instead of being able to slow down. So I've actually been working on, just in the last week, meditations and prayer. My therapist gave me a prayer from, I believe it was St. Patrick, from 433 AD. And it takes me about a couple minutes to do every morning when I sit there and I breathe.
You're just I want to be done with this.
Yeah. But so the crazy thing is, it's retraining your physical body, because it's our physical body that's we've trained it to do we got to go fast, we got to go fast, we got to go fast. Mm-hmm. We got to our brain shooting off choo 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 choo, and we have the ability, as Scripture says, Psalm 46, to be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about Psalm 46, I was reading it last week, there's chaos all around. The first part before the first interlude, it talks about roaring waters and like unstable waters. And the second part, it talks about like a peaceful stream kind of a deal, peaceful waterway. And I think that's, again, the gift that we can give, where it's the world is like the like crazy crashing waves. And it's like, as followers of Jesus, it's like we're there with him. You know? It's peaceful. It's a stream. But you can only do that if you, as Jesus did, you get away sometimes. You go pray up on the mountain. You leave the community to be alone with God.
Well,
That's my stuff.
Oh man, it's so it's so beautiful. Well, and I think like that is we live in the world. We exist in a world right now where Russia and Ukraine have been at war for almost 2 years.
Has it been almost 2 years now?
It'll be 2 years in February.
Wow.
Yeah. Israel and Hamas are at war.
Tensions are high across the world in general.
Yeah, it's
Taiwan,
It's crazy.
China,
Taiwan, China.
Iran.
Yeah, there's just so much happening. We live in that world. We're not separate from that world. We are subject to all of the tragedies and the pain and the violence and abuse and everything that, I was having a conversation last week with someone who she works in anti-human trafficking. She's got a beautiful story, and we were talking about that film.
The Sound of Freedom?
Sound of Freedom.
I haven't seen it yet.
And she was like, "Oh, did you know that the guy who produced that film was kind of asked to step down from his organization because he was accused of?"
I did see that.
I was like,
That's so sad.
like that's the world we live in. But we as believers have a different way of operating in this world that allows us to see these things and be the light that we're called to be. To be, I think last time we ran the pod, we were talking about salt, to be the light and the salt of the earth.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a beautiful thing because we know there's going to be tragedy, but we know the war's already won, and there's people, friends and neighbors in our community that just fight and fight and fight and fight. And, they don't yoke up with Jesus,
Yoking with Jesus. That was episode 2, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's just so important because it's just so easy to burn out and get angry and like forget why we do things. And yeah, I think that is a beautiful thing that the church can offer is like an alternative to like getting mad, raiding a target,
Yeah.
we can provide so many different opportunities to how we react in situations.
Yeah, we want to be less reactive, I think is the gift that the church can offer. Yeah. And that's not to say we can't be passionate about different things.
Absolutely.
It's not saying we're not. And actually what's funny is this coming Sunday, so if you're listening to the pod, you get a little preview. We're talking about the parable of the shrewd manager.
Oh, the parable of the jerk.
Yeah, pretty much. But what's funny? So he's referred to as shrewd, and in our culture today, a shrewd is kind of a negative word.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a jerk, right? But Jesus says kind of in the parable, like, if people of the world are so strategic and smart with their money for material things, how much more important is it for us to be smart and strategic with what we have been given here, but for God's kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think we are supposed to be smart and cunning with the resources God has given us. But the end game is different. Our end game is not, let's build our biggest kingdom here.
Yeah.
It's, what can we do for the next kingdom, where it's investing into people is what it is. It's if we put our resources towards people.
Yeah.
And that's not saying maybe physical projects, buildings and stuff can't be for people in the end, the long-term game.
Can be responsible. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just fascinating to think about how we are called to be, shrewd. Was it smart as
Kind as doves.
Wise as doves, smart as a serpent? Well, I'm going to butcher
I think
that.
it's kind as doves and cunning as serpents.
I don't know. Something like that.
I'm sure there's some translational debate on
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I think, man, I mean, you and I are just kind of getting back into the flow of the pod. But I know for me, like the last couple of weeks, it's been Yeah, and it's funny being at this film festival.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. We had, Brooke's mom watched AJ for a few days, so Brooke and I
Nice.
got a few days of like just rest. We're blessed with beautiful weather. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, we had like 4 sunshiny days in August or in October.
Was it like 40 degrees though?
It was a little chilly. It wasn't too bad, but
Still way better than
rainy and 40 degrees.
yeah.
And Ronnie watched Little Lincoln for a few days.
Nice.
And it was amazing to, slow down and be restful. And, one of the interesting things at this film festival is there's so many films that were just sad. I mean, beautiful films, very well done. But you get to the end and you're like, I'm sad, like there's no hope in that. And this was the best praise I could have gotten for our film, which was on building a clean water system for the orphanage that we were visiting in Uganda, which wasn't the film we went there to make, but we ended up, the Lord kind of orchestrated these circumstances where we were able to build the clean water system for Derek and the kids. Mm-hmm. And the best feedback we got from everyone was like, your doc is the only happy one here. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
Like is
like redemptive, like
Yeah.
positive, like yeah.
There's so much negative, and there's so much that's happening in the world that's not positive, that's not net good, that like I want to share about the good things that are happening, because in the midst of, you could take a step back and look at this orphanage with, 60 kids, and some of the kids have HIV or malaria, and the parents have died from HIV or malaria, and, they're living in, far less than ideal circumstances. And, they're barely scraping by, all of these things. You can look at this and be like, this is terrible. Like, this doesn't make me happy. But then you look at the kids, and the kids are they're loving life. They're out there. They would make these soccer balls out of like grocery bags.
Yeah.
They'd like pack them in and then tie them up with like bamboo reeds, and they love it. They were, they're just having a beautiful time. And you can choose to focus on all of the stuff that's like tragic, or you could and those things at times need to be changed. But you can stop and take a step back and look and be like, man, there's some beautiful stuff happening here. And these kids are like so filled with joy, and I think those are the things that we really need to focus on.
I think it's from just hearing you talk about that. I think that's just what happens when you have a Christian worldview, because it's like, at the end of the day, this isn't it. And so I think with that mentality, you're able to navigate this world with more hope, because you're like, there's a lot of pain and suffering without a doubt. There's war and animosity and greed and cancer and death. But at the end, like, God's going to make this right. Justice will be done, for people who are killing people, for wars and bombing and all that stuff. Like, in the end, it'll be done. And I think as Christians, it's easier to be able to see that long-term game and be like, there is pain, but also it gives us the ability to see the joy within the suffering.
Yeah.
And see that sometimes through suffering, God brings people closer to Him somehow in only ways that He knows how.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just that worldview. Because if you think about, like, specifically in our country, religious nuns are growing. And if you think about that worldview,
not nuns as in female.
not Catholic nuns.
Yeah.
Religious nuns. It's not like they claim
the rise
nothing.
of the nuns. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like the last stat I saw was from 2014 in the state of Oregon. I think it was 61%. And so now, 10 years later, I think we're below. I think we're below. That was a Pew Research thing, but I think we're below 50%. And once that hits, it speeds up. But if you think about that worldview, man, how depressed can you be? Because it's like, oh, we got here by chance. There's all this evil and suffering in the world. Or, it's just what happens. Like, there's no hope in the end. And it's interesting. I was called last week. It was actually the day I got back, I want to say, from my therapy intensive, Friday last week. And someone said, hey, can you go into the hospital and pray for this person who's dying? And I was like, yeah, I'm on my way, because I knew the son-in-law of the guy who was dying. So I go in there, and it's a humbling experience to pray over someone at that point the person was basically, they were alive by machines. And just kind of being there for that. And we stood around them, held hands, and we prayed. But I mean, it's tough, man. It's a very humbling thing to do, because you see that life is so fleeting. And this person was, 62. So he's not even that old. But you see how fleeting life is, and it's like, man, it can be easy to just be like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like this is too much. But from the Christian worldview, that's why slowing down is so important, because we can easily be overwhelmed with all of the insanity.
Yeah.
But when we're with God, our Heavenly Father, we can really be who we are and experience His love, which gives us the motivation, energy to continue to move on and find those aspects of hope in the suffering and in the loss and the pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those gifts that we can give as followers of Jesus. It's not like we're trying to cram ideology down people. I think we should stick to what Scripture says, and not compromise God's word. But at the same time, I don't think we should try to force it to anybody.
No.
I think that people are responsible for themselves. But
And I think I just think it's forcing the gospel on people. It's like, think of when you were a kid.
Doesn't
your parents
work.
like forced you to eat broccoli.
Yeah.
Did that work?
No.
No. I just, for starters, you can't just live right in front of people.
Yeah.
Like, it's not enough. Like, there are times where you are supposed to share the gospel. That's just what's supposed to happen, We're not just called to live right in front of people. And well, I think, and there's evangelism and being a missionary and all that stuff that's very important. However, I don't think that, it's, for starters, if you talk to someone and, the phrase we use a lot is lead them to Christ. You're not
win souls.
Yeah, you're not doing any saving. Like, it's not like you don't get a commission off of this. There's no you did not die on a cross for this person's salvation. You are just sharing in the good news,
sharing a gift that you have received that they can also receive.
Yeah. It's like it's like when if someone's giving out free ice cream. And
you just tell someone else's free ice cream.
You can be like, hey, if you go around the corner, they're giving out free ice cream.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Very important, though. Like, God can use those moments, I think.
Yes.
But at the same time, you can't. It's nothing that you did, but everything that Jesus did.
Yeah.
But He can use you, which is an honor to do so.
You didn't buy the ice cream. You didn't scoop the ice cream. Like, you didn't facilitate this ice cream event. You just got to tell someone. And I feel like, this goes back to like our up and to the right of like, God chose to use you to be an instrument of His will.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. That like and I think some people look down on that, but I think it's super important to realize that the God of the universe chose you, Steven Anderson, to be an instrument of His will. Like, that's, I think the gravity of that, the weight of that privilege should not be lost on anyone.
Yeah.
That the God of the universe chose you to aid in bringing about His kingdom to earth. Like, that's a beautiful thing, and that is supposed to be enough for us.
Yeah.
But I think too often it's not quite enough for people. They want to be like we went on a mission trip to Cambodia and we saved 100 people. Like, you did no saving.
Yeah.
You did lots of sharing, and that's a beautiful thing. And like, praise God that He paved the way for you to be there and to share with people. But like, God died on the cross for them, not you.
Like that song, Our God Saves. You heard that one?
Yeah.
We don't save.
God saves.
Okay, so that made me think about this parable I read this morning. It's actually the second half of Luke 16. I'll read the whole thing because I'll read it quick, but I was thinking about this morning. We can't build theology off the parable, but it's just fascinating. So Jesus said there was a certain rich man who was splendidly clothed in purple and fine linen, and who lived each day in luxury. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. As Lazarus lay there longing for scraps from the rich man's table, the dogs would come and lick his open sores. Gross. Verse 20, I added that part. Finally, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to sit beside Abraham at the heavenly banquet. The rich man also died and was buried, and he went to the place of the dead. There, in torment, he saw Abraham in the far distance with Lazarus at his side. Abraham was a very important spiritual figure in Jewish religion. It still is today, and for Christianity faith too, right? Verse 24, the rich man shouted, Father Abraham, have some pity. Send Lazarus over here to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. I'm in anguish in all these flames. But Abraham said to him, Son, remember that during your lifetime you had everything you wanted, and Lazarus had nothing. So now he is here being comforted, and you are in anguish. And besides, there is a great chasm separating us. No one can cross over to you from here, and no one can cross over to us from there. Then the rich man said, Please, Father Abraham, at least send him to my father's home. For I have 5 brothers, and I want him to warn them so they don't end up in this place of torment. But Abraham said, Moses and the prophets have warned them. Your brothers can read what they wrote. And the rich man replied, No, Father Abraham, but if someone is sent to them from the dead, then they will repent of their sins and turn to God. And here's the kicker. Abraham said, If they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be persuaded even if someone rises from the dead. I was just thinking about that. I was like, dang. That's hardcore. So it's like, okay, we can't build theology off of a parable, but in this parable, this dude is technically in the place of the dead, which would we define as hell. And
Man, oh man.
and then Abraham says, basically, if they don't believe now, or like with everything that is going to happen in their life, it doesn't matter if we send someone from the dead. They won't be persuaded. And I think it's interesting if someone rises from the dead, because who rose from the dead? Jesus. Well, and Lazarus, but yeah. But Jesus, yeah. I just thought that was fascinating.
Wow.
Because we were talking about, like, as you said, we can do sharing. We can tell people about Jesus. But at the end of the day, and it takes a lot of stress, because I feel like in the culture we grew up in the 90s, it was like, if you don't tell them, they're going straight to hell. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, that's a huge burden.
So then you're just like, Jesus.
Yeah, you're like, oh man, I have to, you cram it, right? And I think that obviously we have to have the discernment. I think we are called to share about the gospel, of course, living our life, and verbally as well. But at the end of the day, even if like we build a relationship with someone, let's say we love them, we share Jesus with them, but they could say no.
Yeah.
They could say, oh, that's cool for you, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
And it's like at that time, it's like, okay, like
yeah. And
they're responsible for them.
You planted a seed.
You could plant a seed, absolutely.
And who knows where that's going to go and who that's going to impact. So,
yeah. But I saw that was a fascinating parable.
That's awesome.
I'm not preaching on it this series, though.
Wild.
Yeah. Here we are. My tea is cold, but you have a fancy ember mug that's like still hot.
I'm out of tea, actually.
Oh, you are?
I ran out a while ago. Yeah. Ember mug, I haven't. Yeah, it's this thing is amazing.
Nice.
It's a huge productivity tool, because my tea would get cold, and then I would go into the kitchen
saving time
and microwave it, and then I'd end up doing something else and
what
whatever.
A time waster.
No, it's just always warm.
Boom.
No.
Yeah, but I think we talked about some good stuff this episode.
Yeah, this has been good.
We got to give our shout outs to everyone who watches to the end. Stevie, what's up? Ronnie, what's going on?
Ronnie. So Ryan Unger was going to be our guest. He was going to talk about missions.
Ryan, what's the deal?
And we couldn't make it work. But I caught him. He was hanging out with me in the office, and I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I just Googled 10 ways to make Lord of the Rings fans mad." And he was going to bring those all up on the podcast. But
we have to say hi to Myrna. Myrna has been a faithful listener. Jody. Mitchell. What's up, man? Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'm really glad with with people who listen.
Yeah.
Like, we're just hanging out, and I think people are finding it beneficial, and I'm deeply honored that we're able to kind of have these conversations, and and people are listening. So thanks for listening, you guys. We're hoping that it kind of stimulates conversations and that we can just kind of process through what's happening in the world and talk through God's word together. And
yeah, I'm having
a good time.
I'm gonna go check our comments and make sure.
I didn't see any new ones from this morning.
Make sure we didn't miss anything.
But if you're listening to the end, comment below. If you
Yeah,
have any
comment,
subjects or stuff, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, you guys are. We love it when people comment. We've got some hearts from some people.
Heyo, thanks for the hearts.
That's super great. Some comments that maybe should be removed. No offense to anyone. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll get back into it next week with some more stuff about the sermon and
The Shrewd Manager next week.
Shrewd Manager.
It'll be fun to talk about.
I've got some plans.
Oh, nice.
I've got some plans for next week. It's gonna be,
and if you're still listening, we were talking before, we're going to have a special guest, a surprise episode coming up, depending on when we schedule it.
yeah.
My good friend, Dr. Glenn Maiden, who is a sex addiction therapist, has his
Yeah.
PhD in sex addiction therapy.
That's amazing.
He's a wicked smart dude, and it's gonna be a phenomenal episode, and it's long form, so it's gonna be great.
It's gonna be really good.
He did his PhD dissertation on sexual health in the Book of Genesis.
Wow.
So it's gonna be fun.
Also, something I've been contemplating that I would love to do. I would love to do some live episodes.
Oh, yeah,
that I think
totally.
would be fun. Some live Q&As. I think it'd be fun to do a panel of pastors and to do a live pastors react.
That would be awesome.
Video. I think that'd be fun. So if you guys have ideas or you think any of our ideas would be interesting, please comment below. Also, feel free to share this. You are more than welcome to share this with your community on your Instagram page or Reddit or whatever social medias you use.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.